What up, what up, what up? Hey, everybody, hope you're doing well. Hey, I just want to let you know, I know everybody can't always support and donate to the podcast, but hey, if you can do a one-time donation, I put up a Buy Me a Coffee link in this description of the podcast. So if you go to the description of the podcast, it'll be at the bottom, and you can just go to that link, and you can buy me a cup of coffee, or two if you want. And that would just help support the show, and I can wake up a little bit more and bring you more info. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you can donate, that would be much appreciated. And let's get on to the show. Welcome back to Lockdown Universe, home of the bizarre, peculiar, and unheard of stories of UFO legend and lore. And today we are going to discuss the giants of North America. So we've heard a lot about giants in other parts of the world, not necessarily so much in North America or America proper. And I wanted to discuss not only the giants, but also the Viking lore that comes along with these giants. And I did a little research and I came across an episode of America Unearthed. And the host, Scott Walter, basically goes on an expedition to find more information about these giants, to find the actual bones that prove that these giants existed at one point. Now the theory is that a lot of these giants existed in Minnesota. Thus you have the Minnesota Vikings named football team. Now it seems silly because we think, okay, well, it's just a cartoon on a helmet, but there's actually a lot of history behind it. So let's kind of dive into that, and we can talk a little bit more about how it correlates with the team, also with what Scott actually found at this grave site. So upon investigation, right, we just haven't heard a lot about Vikings, or giants, at least in America. But we have heard a lot about Vikings. And so Scott Walter, what he's done is he has looked for Viking paraphernalia, artifacts, swords, inscriptions on stones that date back to all the way back to the 1300s, 1362, a whole decade before, or a whole century before Columbus reportedly came to America. So we know there's been people that have come to America way before Columbus. That being said, they found this stone in 2000 called the Kensington Rune Stone, which has Norse inscriptions on it. Now, rune is a language and a set of symbols that are very similar to our alphabet. There's just fewer of them, so we have 26 and rune has less. But rune is what the Vikings wrote in, and he located this Kensington stone, Kensington Rune Stone, in Minnesota. So he dedicated a lot of time trying to find more artifacts in Minnesota and possibly even bones. And what he was able to find will blow your mind. So let's keep going. So what he did was, after he found this rune stone, which has rune, what looks like, writing, hieroglyphics kind of style writing on it, he decided to continue. And he came across a man named Roger Saker, who has a farm north of the location where this Kensington Rune Stone was located. So Scott went up to Roger's farm, and what Roger was able to find was an actual burial site for a Viking giant and two native girls. So this Viking giant, they measured out to be humongous. And I'll get to that in a moment. The reason Roger was able to find this giant in the first place, he was looking for gravel to finish off and repurpose his foundation. He needed to lock it back in, so he was looking for an area to dig on his farm, and his farm is massive. And so he started to dig in this location, and when he started to dig, he hit bones, and so he actually dug up this giant's feet during this gravel dig. And so all of a sudden he sees these huge bones in his dig, pile of rocks, and he says, okay, well, I got to see what's going on down there. So he dug more, and they called out the state archaeological team. They called out the Native American authorities to come and check this location out. And what they measured this giant to be was between 8.5 to 9 feet tall. They also had two Native American girls who were short, probably, I think they said in like the upper 4 foot, 5 foot range. And so the two girls were buried near his feet in the fetal position. This giant was laying straight on his back. And what happened was, as soon as this state archaeological team came out, their eyes got, as wide as, 8 balls on a pool table, and they said, what the hell, what is this? They just couldn't figure it out. And it just looked different than any other dig site they had seen. These bones were older, much older, and they just couldn't put two and two together. The size didn't match the time period. And so they had estimated that, these were multiple hundreds of years old, and just couldn't figure it out. So the question remains, is this an alien, or is this a Viking giant, just a human giant? I mean, do we even have anybody that's 8'6", 9 feet tall? Well, the tallest person ever recorded was born in Alton, Illinois, and died in Michigan. His name was Robert Wadlow, and he was known as the Alton Giant. And he stood at a height of 8'11" and weighed 490 pounds. So it just goes to ask what we have one guy 8'11". Not too many people get over the 8 foot mark. You might have like a 7-footer in the NBA, and that's tall, right? That's really tall. But to get 8'11", it's really, really rare. This guy that was buried in Minnesota, the giant, was 8.5 to 9 feet tall, close to Robert Wadlow's height, which is the tallest man ever recorded in Guinness Book of World Records. So either there's a race of these tall 8.5 to 9 foot tall guys, or this guy just dug up one of the most unlikely digs of all time. So what do you think? Was there more people than this? Well, what Scott Walter, the host of American Unearthed, pulled out was a document from 1888. It was a newspaper clipping, a newspaper article from the St. Paul paper, which stated that in a town not far away from Rogerstown, there was a dig, and they were digging up for a well, and they found 7 gigantic bodies that they dated to be prehistoric, and this was in Clearwater, Minnesota, and they decided it was a race of giants that were between 7.5 to 8.5 feet tall. So you had seven of these bodies now, plus the one on Roger Sager's farm. So you have 8 total bodies in a small geographical area that were able to be dug up. Now, when we unearth people, unearth bones, I mean, it's pretty rare, but there's tons of bones. There's been tons of people who've passed away, right? Well, how is it that we've been able to find now 8 people in a small geographical area that were all over, well over the standard height for people during, the 1300s, 1400s? You get the standard height during that time period was probably about 5 foot. So we've grown, as we've adapted to, evolved and gotten better food sources and things like that. We've grown, but to have multiple people that are 8 feet now we're talking about, okay, are these just a group of people like the Vikings, or are these actually aliens? It's a really big mystery, and we know that aliens have been tinkering with our genetics for, millennia, multiple millennia, and it just goes to show you that, anything is possible. But what we do know is that there has been a massive amount of Viking lore in Minnesota, and it continues and persists to this very day, as we see with the Minnesota Vikings football team, right? So if we look at, a little bit of history here about why the Vikings were named that, we look into an article on CBS Minnesota that talks about some of their lore, that they actually dated their designs back to the 1050 to 1080. So they replicated some of the Viking shields. They replicated those on the wall in the stadium's hallway. They replicated a Viking boat out in front. And what is etched into the side of the Viking ship is to honor your legacy and defend the North, which is the team's motto. And it came from a runic translation. And they state that runic is not quite a language, but they're letters, much like ours, only fewer. And the rune stones were vital to these Vikings in this area. They told stories in stone with an alphabet of just 16 letters, okay? So 10 less than us. And obviously these were huge explorers. They came from Europe and they dominated many continents. Everywhere they went, they dominated, right? It was a legend that Vikings would drink from the skulls of their vanquished, right? Engraved on each stone would be the word skull, Skol. Viking legend claims that, of course, they made drinking vessels out of their enemies' skulls, but in reality, it states that it's actually a Scandinavian word for toast. So you say skull when you're about to drink. So that's kind of interesting. It actually means a bowl more than it means skull. So getting back to Scott Walter on America on Earth's episode, they actually found more evidence of these large giants or Vikings, whatever they are, in that area. They actually found a sword as well, predating into the 1300s. It was a sword that was approximately 3 feet long. So a smaller sword, not like a 5-foot sword or anything like a lightsaber or anything like that. But it had intricate designs. It had a spun woven handle. It also had a ornament in the middle of the hilt, possibly indicating their clan or whoever they belong to. And that was also located near Scott Saker's farm. So now we're gathering all this evidence up for a large, giant population in Minnesota. So, it could be interpreted in many different ways. However, at the end of the day, these are giants, no matter which way you look at it, if they're human or not, if they're our ancestors or not. And the question, goes, if these giants were that tall, right, 6 to 9 feet tall, possibly even taller, the question remains, where's their progeny? Where are their children? Because we should have a bunch of 8.5 to 9 foot tall people walking around, but we don't. We have basketball players that are pretty tall, 6'7", maybe 6'10", but nowhere near 8.5, 9 feet tall, or maybe even taller. So the question remains, where did these people go? Were the Vikings or these giants killed off before they could have children? If they were such a dominant species, they would have had children. They would have had children in many locations. Wherever they dominated, wherever they go, they would have left behind huge children behind them in their wake. If you look at genetics, I've looked at genetics and I've seen what tall men and shorter women, their children, you would think, okay, it's supposed to be a mix in between that, right? But typically, it's a tall individual that is the child of a tall man and a shorter woman. So we should still have these very tall individuals walking the earth, but they're not. So were they all killed off? Did they leave Earth? Where did they go? It really is a mystery. And I love Viking lore. I love Viking legend. It's a fascinating subject. They were pretty brutal, according to history. There's even a television show called Vikings. So it's a fascinating culture, and it's made its way even continuing to this very day into our own football culture. So who are these people? Where'd they go? We don't know. But we continue to search for the answers. But needless to say, we do have giants in America. So don't let anyone fool you. Don't look at the pictures and say, oh, that can't be true, because it can be. It is. And we have testimony now. We have proof, and you can look it up. So where do we go from here? We continue to search for the truth. And that's what we do. So thanks for joining me on this journey. Thanks for joining me on this path. It's been entertaining, educational. Apparently, if you ever get a chance, maybe we should go do a dig in Minnesota. So anyway, hopefully you guys are taking care of your physical health, spiritual health, emotional health, taking care of your friends and family, focusing on your hobbies and your goals and your dreams, and always continuing to question the universe around you. Until next time, guys, take care. Lockdown Universe out.